So you've got a brilliant idea for a startup. You're ready to change the world. Well, this explainer is for you because we're about to talk about the single biggest hurdle you're going to face, building something that people actually want. Take a look at this number, 42%. According to a huge study by CB Insights, that's the percentage of startups that go under for one single reason. And it's not what you think. It's not running out of money. It's not getting outmaneuvered by a competitor. Nope. It's because they burned all their time, all their energy building a solution for a problem that nobody really had. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start by digging into that number one startup killer. Then we'll explore something called the mirage of demand. It's a psychological trap. After that, we're getting practical with a toolkit, the vitamin versus painkiller test, the mom test, and how to prove it all with data. And we'll wrap it up with why fit over funding is the name of the game. Okay, let's get right into it. The number one startup killer. And seriously, this isn't just a catchy title. This is the data-backed reality. It's like the silent threat that lurks beneath all the other, more obvious reasons you hear about for why startups fail. I mean, just look at this chart. That first bar, no market need at 42%, it dwarfs everything else. We're always hearing about startups running out of cash, right? But that's a distant second. Even having the wrong people on your team is way behind. The numbers don't lie. The market is the ultimate decider. And this really gets to the core of it. Running out of money isn't the actual disease. It's just the final, fatal symptom. Think about it. If nobody wants what you're building, of course investors are going to stop writing checks. Money is just an accelerant. It makes a good business go faster, but you know what? It makes a bad business fail faster too. Which leads us perfectly into our next section, the mirage of demand. This is where things get a little tricky, a little psychological, because founders, and especially student founders, are incredibly vulnerable to seeing demand that just isn't there. You get trapped in this echo chamber. So the first trap is something called the IKEA effect. You know this feeling. You spend your entire Saturday wrestling with confusing instructions to build a wobbly bookshelf. But by the end, you love that bookshelf more than anything. Why? Because you built it. The same thing happens with your startup. All those late nights coding and designing make you fall in love with your own creation, making you think it's way more valuable than it really is to an outsider. And then you add a dash of confirmation bias into the mix. This is our brain's sneaky little habit of only looking for evidence that proves we're right. You go ask your friends, hey, isn't this app a great idea? And of course they say, yeah, it's awesome, just to be nice. You write that down as validation, and you conveniently ignore the fact that none of them have ever asked to actually use it. And the final piece of the puzzle is anchoring bias. That one professor who told you 6 months ago your idea had potential, that becomes the anchor for your entire belief system, even when all the new data is screaming, this isn't working. You put these three biases together, and you get this powerful, shimmering mirage of demand that's built on nothing but bad data and wishful thinking. So, how in the world do you break free from that mirage? How do you see reality? Well, you apply a very simple but incredibly powerful filter. And that brings us to the vitamin versus painkiller test. This is hands down the best litmus test for any startup idea. This is the fundamental question you have to answer. Is your product a vitamin? A nice to have, something that's cool, makes life a tiny bit better? Or is it a painkiller for a hair on fire problem? I want you to literally picture this. Your friend's hair is on fire. Are they asking you about the ergonomic design of the fire extinguisher? No, they are screaming, willing to pay anything just to make the pain stop right now. That's the kind of urgency you're looking for. And you can just see the difference in how customers react. A vitamin, your cool idea, gets you a polite, oh, that's neat, yeah, let me know when it launches. A painkiller gets you, wait, can I use this right now? Seriously, how much is it? Vitamins lose users all the time once the novelty wears off. But with a painkiller, your users get actually angry if you take it away. That's the difference between a cool idea and a real business. Okay, so you know you need to find that painkiller problem, but how do you actually do that without falling for all those psychological traps we talked about? The answer is having the right tools, and it starts with what's called the mom test, a framework for getting the brutal, honest truth from people. And here is the golden rule, the most important part. You don't talk about your idea. The second you mention your idea, people just go into polite mode. They don't want to hurt your feelings. Instead, you talk about them. You talk about their life, their workflow, and the problems they've had in the past. That's where the gold is. That's where you find actionable data. And here's what that looks like in the real world. Instead of a totally leading question like, do you think this is a good idea? You ask something open-ended, like, what are the biggest challenges you have with whatever? Instead of a hypothetical, would you pay for an app that did this? You ask about what they already do. So how are you currently solving this problem? See the shift? It moves the focus off your ego and onto their actual lived experience. Having those great conversations, that's step one. But feelings aren't proof. Now we've got to move from those qualitative stories to hard, quantitative data. Let's talk about how you can actually validate your idea before you even think about writing a single line of code. The model here is so simple, but the order is absolutely critical. It goes hypothesize, then validate, then build. First, you state a really clear testable guess. Then, you figure out the cheapest, fastest way to test it. Maybe it's a simple landing page to see if people will give you their email. Maybe it's a concierge MVP, where you literally do the service by hand for your first customers. Only, and I mean only, after the data proves people actually want this thing, should you invest the time and money to build the full product. And please remember this when you're validating. Vanity metrics, like likes on social media, they feel great, but they mean absolutely nothing for your business. A real signal is commitment. It's an email address. Even better, it's a credit card number. I'm telling you, a 10% conversion rate on a dead simple landing page is a signal that's 1,000,000 times more valuable than 1,000 "that's so cool" comments from your friends. Okay, which brings us to our last and probably most important section, fit over funding. This is where we tie it all together and really understand the true hierarchy of what a startup needs to survive and thrive. You know, we all love the story of the super passionate founder who works 20-hour days and never gives up. But that's a dangerous half-truth. Passion is crucial, of course it is. But when you apply all that passion to a bad idea that nobody wants, well, you're just finding a very efficient way to fail. You're just running into a brick wall, but faster. Passion can't force someone to buy something they don't need. So, look, if there is one single thing you take away from this entire explainer, I hope it's this. Do not fall in love with your solution. Don't fall in love with your clever app or your elegant code. Fall in love with your customer's hair on fire problem. Obsess over their pain. Understand it better than they do. Because when you do that, the right solution almost becomes obvious. The market will literally pull it out of you. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Just for a second, forget about your product. Forget about your solution. Look around you, at your campus, your industry, your own life. What is that urgent, painful, hair-on-fire problem that you, and maybe only you, are perfectly positioned to solve? Find that, and you've already won half the battle.